What is up, everyone? Welcome back. New and improved. Look a little cleaner today for you guys. I'm sure the two people in this world that'll be the most happiest to see this baby face are mom and dad when they pop up. They'll be pleasantly surprised. So welcome back to another family education and support group. I had a little dental work done yesterday. So I had 2 teeth extracted. I had some bone grafting and some implant posts put inside my mouth. So this side of my mouth is a little bit raw. I will do my best to have the same energy, but I might run out of gas at some point. So all that being said, let's do a quick introduction of myself, let you know what we're going to talk about today, and we'll go from there. So today is Saturday, November 9th of 2024. We are here live once again with the intention to add a little bit of value to your life, help you see some of your conscious and unconscious patterns that you've experienced, help you grow a little bit and get one step closer to where you're trying to go from where you are in life. This talk covers various things. We'll talk about transformation. We'll talk about recovery. We'll talk about trauma. We'll talk about grief and loss, personal development. We talk about it all on this channel. And today's going to be one of those heavier conversations, but it's going to help a lot of people out. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So my name is Param. I come here most Saturdays for about 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, and I do a live stream. And I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I'm licensed as an addictions counselor. I have been in personal recovery myself for the past 16 plus years. June 13th of 2008 is the date, and I intend to make that date memorable. And what's up, Marilyn? Welcome back. Jessica, good to see you as always. And so I also teach Saddleback Community College. I coach high school basketball. I do some mindset and performance coaching with people. I'm an avid pickleball enthusiast, a little bit more than a hobby for me. It's a way of life. But all that being said, let's get into it. So there's something that, needs to be talked about a little bit more when it comes to the healing, the mental health, addictions, the transformation space. And that is the impact that various things in our childhood have on our development. Okay, specifically when it comes to the topic of trauma. And trauma, sometimes we associate the word trauma with things that happen to a human being that shouldn't have happened. But sometimes things that should have happened but never happened can also be traumatic. I remember vividly talking to a heroin addict about what his experience was with heroin, like why heroin over his freedom, over his children, over his life, over everything. He said, man, heroin was like the warmest hug I always wanted but never got. You know how profound that statement is? It's the warmest hug I always wanted but never got. See, in that case, things that should have happened never happened, and it was trauma. That young soul, when he was a kid, needed to get someone to say, it's okay, I love you, it's going to be all right. But no one was there. See, no one ever beat that kid. No one ever abused that kid. But that form of emotional neglect, not being there for that kid, when they found it in heroin, it's like a warm blanket of love that gets wrapped around the opiate addicts. True fact. So we're going to talk a little bit about some symptoms of childhood trauma. And I want you to kind of think if you've ever experienced any of these adverse childhood experiences, they call them. I've done a whole talk on this, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But these are the kind of things that they identified in a really big study. It was a 20-year longitudinal study, actually maybe even longer than that. Over 17,000 people. Kaiser Permanente did this in the 90s. And they wanted to see why certain people are unable to execute the treatment plans and get the healing they want. The creator of this plan, his name was Vincent Folletti. He actually was a director at an obesity clinic. And all these individuals are in there with type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, very, very high BMIs that's putting stress on their organs and body. And despite of all that, they were unable to make the changes. He's like, why? So he created up this adverse childhood experiences study, and they gave it to all these 17,000 people in Kaiser. So here's what it was. Did you ever experience any type of abuse? Now, whether that's physical, sexual, emotional. Did you ever experience any type of neglect? Also physical, emotional. Was there any mental illness in your family? So we're talking about personality disorders, bipolar. We're talking about anxiety disorders, depression, to the point that was severe, not like an episodic or not like a circumstantial version, but like a severe major depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, were any of your family members ever incarcerated or institutionalized? So did they ever go away for whether it was for crime or for mental health or addictions? Did you ever experience or witness domestic violence inside the home as a child? And specifically, this one's really niche, specifically against your mother. So did you ever watch somebody, it could be your father or not your father, abuse your mother? And the next one was there substance abuse in the family? Alcoholism, drug addiction. And did you ever experience any type of abandonment through divorce, okay, or separation, or death? And sometimes, I'm not saying did you ever experience divorce. That's not the adverse childhood experience. It's abandonment as a result of divorce. I know many people that their parents split up, but the parents are so committed to the children that they do what they have to do to be able to stay with their children, right? But there are some that go their separate ways. So, all that being said, if you identified with a few, some, or all those, I want to share now on how those childhood experiences could potentially impact and manifest in adulthood. And that's what this talk is all about. So sometimes people are unable to correlate those two things together. Like it's a pattern that they do, but they don't know it stems from childhood trauma. And the part about this that's interesting is, and I actually want you to be mindful of this, is if you are under the school of thought that you believe that things that happen to you in your childhood are buried then and there, and they have no weight or no pull or no impact on your current version of life, I want to invite you to consider, what if it does impact you? What if there is a significant impact on the way you live your life, the relationships you have, the way you experience the world based on those experiences? And I'm not saying if they were good, bad, and different, if it's a life sentence, you have it forever. There are ways to work through it, to heal through it, to navigate through it with the intention of, resolving those challenges. So number one, and I'll type it as I go because I realized I didn't be properly ready. So the fear of abandonment. Fear of abandonment. Okay. Abandonment. That's correct. Okay. I'll put this up here. In case anyone has any questions, you can ask. So if you experience any type of the adverse childhood experiences I talked about, you may have a significant fear of abandonment in life. Okay. And what is a fear of abandonment? It is unrealistic. It is not really rooted in any type of evidence. It's the constant thought that those in my life will leave me because it could be unlovable, because I'm not good enough, because I'm not worthy of their love. And there's this constant fear, and it turns into like this attachment and codependency of like neediness. Because the more I cling on, the less ability they're going to have to leave, not knowing that the more you cling on, the more likelihood of them leaving. And the part about this that's interesting is individuals who have a fear of abandonment put themselves in situations that are unnecessary, oftentimes abusive, because they just don't want to be left alone. They're terrified of being left alone. And the flip side of this, so there's always two sides to every coin. The flip side of this is the individual has such a severe fear of abandonment that they sabotage relationships and blow them up before they can be abandoned. They leave relationships before they could be left. They go they walk away before someone can walk away from them. It's a manifestation of control. It's a way of being able to, not let the circumstances define us, but us defining the circumstances. But unfortunately, what that coping skill does is what? It leaves you in this constant world of feeling alone and not feeling good enough and feeling like nobody cares. And all people do is they go through life trying to find evidence of why those things are real. So if you have a irrational fear of abandonment, and also I want you to know this doesn't just go to intimate relationships or family dynamics. This also goes to work environments or friendships. There's people that are willing to they're willing to do 10x of what they're supposed to do at work because they don't want to be let go of, because they don't want to be abandoned. There's people that do way more for their friends than their friends do for them. They'll drive them around, they'll buy them stuff, they'll lend them money, they'll be what they call it. These people usually call themselves a floor mat. So it bleeds into every area. So if you identify with having an irrational fear of abandonment, I want you to know that it is potentially a sign of childhood trauma. So the next one that we have is there is a significant impact on the mental health, potentially the use of substances, risky behavior, we'll talk about what that is, and even autoimmune diseases. So you're wondering, how does childhood trauma lead to autoimmune diseases, bro? Get out of here. Now you're talking gibberish. No, there's science behind it. So if you had childhood trauma, let's say you're coming from a home that there was domestic violence in, or you're coming from a home that a family member was either mentally ill or abusing substances, and the environment was very volatile. You can't tell me that you're cool, calm, collected in that house. What are you feeling? Anxiety, panic, stress, right? There's like serious feelings that a child feels in that environment. And later on in life, it's not like those feelings just go away, right? They turn into anxiety disorders, right? And when someone has that significant anxiety as a result of their upbringing, as soon as they pick up the drink, well, first of all, it turns into their own mental illness. Their mental health gets compromised. Things like depression, anxiety, stuff like that. It seriously impacts those who experience environments in their childhood that had those kind of criteria that we're talking about. And then if you're feeling a lot of anxiety and you're feeling a lot of dysregulation of emotions, as soon as that individual finds a substance, right? It might be a substance that brings them down. It might be a substance that takes them up, or up, down, or all around. All of a sudden, it's like this self-medication for all of the symptoms that they really, really struggle with. And it's like, that warmest hug I always wanted but never got. Oftentimes people say, I finally feel comfortable in my own skin. So why should somebody feel uncomfortable in their own skin? Because the life that they were in was uncomfortable. So substance abuse becomes really high with those who experience childhood trauma. The next one is risky behavior, which could be like, promiscuity, having multiple sexual partners. As a child, it could be running away. It could be maladaptive coping skills such as self-harm, cutting, or disordered eating disorders. Addiction, behaviors and processes in which there's significant harm done to the mind, the body, the spirit, the soul of the human being. So you could see how that leads to that. And I also said autoimmune diseases. So you might be saying, like I said, how is that the case? Well, if a person's coming from a place of anxiety and stress, so if your house is just dysfunctional, what happens in that case? Well, your fight or flight turns on. Fight or flight is a system that's intended to preserve life. It's a survival thing. So if my survival thing is on because the environment's crazy, all of the other organs and all the other systems and all the other parts of the body, they're going to dim down. It's not like an on and off switch. It's more like a dimmer. It dims down. And one of those systems that dims down is our immune system. That's why people that are constantly worried and constantly stressed are constantly sick. So when your immune system goes down, you become more susceptible to autoimmune diseases. And that's how it happens. So there's actually a reason behind why I said that. I'm not just making it up to scare you. The next one that we have is people that experience childhood trauma. They have a significant need. I'm just copying and pasting it because I had it ready. Needing a lot of space or time to yourself. So why is that the case? Well, again, if you are in an environment that's chaotic and dysfunctional, okay, and you don't feel safe, where is a place that you can feel safe? Well, when nobody's around, when the environment is just, when you're void of the environment, you could just be by yourself underneath the bed, just kind of like reading a book, going in the closet, just hanging out by yourself, climbing up trees, going, running away. These behaviors that people do, as a child, what do you think happens to them later on? Do you think all of a sudden they're going to feel comfortable in a room full of people? You think they're going to be comfortable in social settings? You think they're going to be comfortable in the workplace, comfortable on social teams, all that kind of stuff? No. They need a lot of time to themselves because that's the way they cope. But unfortunately, the more time you spend by yourself and the more space that you need, what does that do? If you are already predisposed to things like depression, it will not only take that depression and magnify it and put it on steroids, it turns into major depressive disorders. It makes anxiety worsen when we're in social settings because you're isolated so much by yourself. And it also leads to people to using substances and maladaptive behaviors behind closed doors where no one even knows they're doing it. The closet drinkers. The closet drinker is not just a saying, my friends. There's literally people that drink behind closed doors because that's the only way they know how to cope. So if you are one of those, and by the way, I'm a big fan of alone time. Big fan. I think it's a really valuable thing, but it's not a coping skill. It's like a time block set aside in order to recharge batteries, in order to kind of refuel and then go back to live life. It's kind of like having a cell phone. If I use it all day, at some point, this cell phone needs to be put down, charged, and put into a wall so it can work again. So that's the same thing that I think of when I think about that. Solitude, yes. I don't know why all these, whoever's messaging from Facebook, it just says Facebook user. It doesn't say your name for some reason. See, Facebook user, Facebook is weird. Okay. So regardless, but yeah, solitude. The next one that we have here is unequal financial and household responsibility. So let me put this on the board. Okay. So what does this one mean? If you experience trauma in your life or traumatic experiences like we discussed earlier, having someone in your house that's mentally ill or using substances or watching domestic violence or someone left and you feel abandoned, someone's got to pick up the slack. Oftentimes it's the oldest child or the most responsible child. For some reason, it happens to be the older one usually. And what does that child have to do at a young age? Well, someone tells him or her, you got to grow up and you got to help. I need help with the cooking and cleaning. I need help with the chores. I need help with the laundry. I need help with making money. And all of a sudden, that little kid loses their childhood and has to become something they call a parentified role. It's a role of a parent. And they start taking on unequal household responsibilities. And even unequal financial responsibilities. I know many young adult kids, 16, 17 years old, have to drop out of school so they can be the man of the house and pay the bills of their family. So what do you think happens to that person later on in life? They're all of a sudden they're like, you know what? That chapter of my life is closed now. Now I can be in a relationship that everyone pays 50-50. I can be in a relationship that everybody works 50-50. I no longer have. No, they find people in life in which they can be responsible for. They find people in life that don't do shit around the house and they do all the work, leaving them feeling frustrated, annoyed, agitated, angry, pissed off, and the cycle repeats. Because they wear this hat of the caretaker, not knowing that the hat of the caretaker is going to bring in people in their lives that they're going to take care of. And it leads to serious resentment. So if you're constantly in a relationship that you're doing more than the other person, it's not because you're such a hero. It's not because you're such a martyr. It's not like you're such a great person. I mean, you might be, don't get me wrong. I got a lot of people right now that get pissed off, but maybe it's because of, upbringing, dysfunctional family systems you grew up in. And you just think that that's the way relationships are and it's familiar to you. So if you do not want that to happen, if you want to be in a, reciprocal relationship that all parties do the same, then it's time to look at this stuff and ask yourself, not why they keep doing it, but why do I keep allowing it? That's where the magic's at. I mean, you can't control other people's actions, but you can think about yourself and why you allow certain things to happen. And if you no longer want it, you sit with the person and say, yo, what are we going to do differently? Because I can't do this anymore. How are we going to change? Like, what are you going to do differently? I need to know what it is tangibly. What the hell are you going to do differently? And if there's something there, there's something there. If there's not, there's not. So the next one we have is Staying in abusive relationships, settling and staying in abusive relationships much longer than the expiration date. So when someone's, let's say, physically abusive and there's unfortunate abuse in the house, obviously didn't start then and there, right? Nobody just becomes physically abusive. It's either something that they watched in their life, it's something that they've done in their life. It just is now manifesting for the first time in this relationship. And let's say there's couples, together, and after a little bit of time, there's this first episode of abuse. As soon as that happens, the person that was abused says, "What the hell, man? Like, I thought you loved me. Why'd you hurt me like this?" And the person says, "Well, it was because of X, Y, Z." And it keeps going on. And let's say the person's physically abusive again and physically abusive again, and the abuse each time gets more and more and more and more. When a person decides to put up with that physical abuse longer than its expiration date, here's the thing again, it's less about why they keep doing it and why you keep allowing it. So people that experience childhood trauma, so if you watched your mom, or it doesn't always have to be a male and female, by the way, there are a lot of relationships that the female is the abuser to the male. And I know that's not what society portrays it to be, but it exists. And same-sex marriages also have significant amount of abuse in them. So it's not always just the male being the abuser to the female. It happens literally always, all dynamics. What happens is men are less likely to admit or go seek help for the fact that they're being abused. Okay. So what happens in this case is, if you witnessed it growing up, you watched your mom or dad experience abuse, and no one did anything about it day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, it becomes this thing that's really familiar to you. And when something's familiar to you, it's kind of like a fish in the water, it doesn't know it's in water. So people think that's just the way it is, but it's not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to hurt like that. We do have a choice. We do have a say in what we want to experience in life. So the next one that we have is, let's see, constant arguing or fighting in relationships. I'm putting it up just so you guys can see it. There we go. So if you experience any type of childhood trauma, childhood adverse experiences, as we talked about earlier, you may later on in life be in relationships in which you constantly argue and fight, or avoid conflict at all costs, kind of like the AKA the silent treatment. So this is what I like to call, the black and white approach to relationships, the on or off button, the all in or all out, the hot or cold. See, there is no relationship that is remotely healthy if people are constantly arguing and fighting. Now, there might be in any relationship an argument that happens, a fight that happens, and how they come together and rebound and rebuild after that is the differentiator. But if it's constantly happening, and sometimes say like, "Oh, I love a relationship, it's so passionate, we're fighting all the time." It's like, no, man, that's a straight sign of childhood trauma. Like, nobody's supposed to be fighting all the time with their significant other. Or sometimes, people say, the only way I can get my loved one to pay attention to me is if I give them the silent treatment. That's the only way they can wake up. It's like, no, that's also a horrible sign. If you want someone to wake up, you sit down and you talk to each other. So avoiding conflict at all costs, silent treatments are actually very abusive ways of communication. So if you are a person that sees yourself or finds yourself in relationships that you're constantly arguing or constantly going through like the on and off, hot and cold, it's less to do with the fact that it's a beautiful relationship and it's just what makes you feel alive, and more to do with the fact that it's a byproduct. It's like a response to previous trauma or abuse you may have witnessed growing up. The next one, the last one that I have here, is not knowing how to repair after fights. So people that experience or witness any type of abuse, trauma in their life, or they come from adverse childhood experiences, they oftentimes don't know how to repair after fights. So where do we learn how to repair after fights, first and foremost? Well, let's say someone gets dysregulated, a kid starts crying really hard when they're a kid. Well, in a healthy model, a responsible adult is supposed to come talk to them, get down to their level, because you're supposed to talk to people eye to eye. So you get down on one knee, look the little kid in the eye and say, "What's going on?" And the kid tells you how sad and scared they are. And you say, "Well, look at sadness and fear are emotions that all people experience, including myself. Here's a time that I felt sad, or here's a time that I felt afraid. And it was such a scary feeling, but I knew that things got better. And so tell me, what kind of things do you think are going to make you feel better? And the kid has a dialogue. And here's the thing, you go back and forth, and you help, the adult helps the child learn how to rebuild after emotion dysregulation. But what if the kid breaks down and cries and is in horrible amounts of fear, but no one's there to soothe them or regulate them? They have to do it on their own. And guess what kids come up with? Weird stuff. Disassociation, avoidance patterns, anger, explosive anger, running away. That's what kids come up with. So if you don't know how to rebuild after fights, if you don't know how to kind of regulate your nervous system, your emotional system after fights, it has less to do with the fact that you're weak emotionally and more to do with the fact of a potential byproduct of childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences you endured. So, today's talk was a little bit more on the heavier side of things. I know that, my friends, and that's okay. Sometimes we come to places like this to laugh a little bit. Sometimes we come to learn a little bit about personal development, and sometimes we come to introspect on our lives and reflect on the journey that has led us to this moment, and to look at it from a responsible adult eyes with the intention of seeing what we can do to improve just 1% each day. So like I said, I had a lot of dental work done yesterday. My mouth is really starting to flare up right now. So that's all I got for you today. I love and appreciate all of you. I'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye, everyone.